One, two.
We are live. Thank you to everybody that's tapped in. Today is January 22nd, and you are listening to the He Nuh show on WINN Media 98.9. We're also live streaming on Instagram, we're on the Facebook, and we're on YouTube. So tap in. We're on all the socials. I want to say Happy New Year to everybody that listens to the show. This is our first show for 2023, and we haven't been around for a little bit because we were on a little hiatus. Everybody was celebrating Carnival and Christmas holidays.
Family was in.
Yeah, so I'm hoping everybody started the new year off correctly. I'm hoping everybody had a good time, and we know the year ended not so well for a few persons, and we empathize, we sympathize, we send condolences. Moving into the new year, we attempt to do that with a renewed sense of vigor, renewed spirit, and we wish everybody is doing well. So, against that backdrop, I'm wondering, and I had this thought earlier this week, we were thinking about New Year's resolutions. It's January, it's a new year, and often we hear people talk about they've created resolutions for the new year, aspirational goals, things that they want to do, things that they want to stop doing, engagements that they want to pursue. So we're going to dissect New Year's resolutions. What's the feasibility? Do they make sense? How do they play out? Especially in our context, in the Caribbean context. For me personally, I think New Year's resolutions are good. They're aspirational. They're good in as much as they're backed by discipline and determination, right? I think what a New Year's resolution is, in the short term, it's a dopamine hit. You've created a vision for where you want your life to go for this upcoming year, and you articulate it. You might say it to a few of your friends, and more time we see that's exactly where it stops. People create grandiose New Year's resolutions. They're going to lose weight. They want to lose 15 pounds, 20 pounds by X date, or by December they're going to start businesses. They're going to be better parents. They're going to be better partners. They're going to work harder. All of these things we hear, and for the most part, I would say maybe 5%, if that much, of persons who actually articulate New Year's resolutions follow through with them. What do you think? What are your views on New Year's resolutions?
I mean, I agree with you in terms of the aspirational. I think there's good milestone, like markers to put down for yourself, and to see where things end up by the end of the year. But sometimes we have New Year's resolutions, but not really like a plan towards each goal. So it's just like, I want to be, let's say, a better parent. But then what are the the steps into being that? You got to break down that goal. But I don't really think that we emphasize on that, or it was even like taught that in essence. It was just almost just like set a goal and you go towards it, but it's no clear plan to see if you're hitting the mark every day.
Right.
Right.
So for the New Year's resolution, what you're saying is we kind of create the goals, but we don't set up the metrics that would guide the achievement of those goals.
Yeah, and we don't set up, we don't break certain habits. It's almost like it's a dream. It's just an idea, but it's like floating there, and there's no real seriousness to it.
Yeah, I think it's a dopamine hit too.
Definitely a dopamine hit.
I think it's a dopamine hit. So for the persons listening, dopamine is a chemical that's created in the brain that makes you feel good when you achieve certain things or when you do certain things.
And even not even achieve, make you feel good. Sometimes just saying it. So sometimes just saying that this is my goal for this year makes you feel good to tell people. But tomorrow you wake up and
it's aspirational, and you feel lazy to achieve the goals. Yeah. So I mean, what's better? As opposed to a New Year's resolution, what have you created in terms of your goal structure or your aspirations for 2023? How do you plan to approach those? And what do you think is a better approach instead of, creating a New Year's resolution?
I mean, I try to make a step, like a day by day. Okay, let's say that I want to get in shape. Somebody might say that I want to be in shape by the end of 2023. And, well, those start small. Say, okay, a minimum of 3 days I'm going to work out, a minimum of maybe 30 minutes, right? And pick 3 days in the week, right? And make sure that's the minimum I hit. Because sometimes we have these like grand goals, right? And they feel so big that if we miss, we kind of give up on them or just let them just fall on the wayside.
Yeah.
So it's all about just setting up like different habits. The changing habits is difficult there.
So what you're talking about, even starting small and pacing yourself, essentially, that still has a heavy reliance on discipline, on self-discipline. So for me, what I've decided to do for 2023 in terms of goal achievement, and I'm usually a disciplined enough person. Like I pursue the things that I said I'm going to pursue. But there are some really big goals that I have for this year. And what I've found works well for me is accountability. So if I create an accountability channel, a communication channel that keeps me accountable. So I identify somebody I trust. I might say to you, yo, blood, I want to lose weight, right? I want to gain a six-pack, let's just say, by April. Now, what that does is because I've communicated that to you and I trust you, we have a communication, and I said to you, I want you to also keep me accountable. So ask me about it and press me if you feel like I'm slipping, right? I think that would be a little bit more beneficial to some persons rather than putting all of the responsibility on themselves. Because one of the things that I've identified, just in life generally, is a lot of people do better when they have accountability, when they're accountable. And I think that is one of the reasons for people who procrastinate in terms of getting a task done, but then they punch it out for the last 2 days right before it's supposed to be submitted, whatever it is. So let's say you have a task that you need to submit at work, or you're in school and you're supposed to submit a project, right? We see a lot of people who, they might have a month to do it, 2 months to do it, and they wait until the final week to really start. But it's that accountability date. That date where they know if they don't submit it by X date, they're accountable. That date now creates the impetus, it creates the drive. So I'm saying we could create that same type of model in life generally.
Yeah, but it's almost like just putting deadlines to things, right? And sometimes we create some plans, and like you're saying, and we don't put any deadlines. And it's good to have an accountability partner. But, sometimes it's also good to try to develop past that,
Well, I think what happens is if you create, let's say you've identified, you do the reflection and you notice, I'm not very strong on personal discipline, on self-discipline, right? Because there are some people, if they have something to do for you, they get it done, right? But if they have something to do for themselves, it's a little bit wavy, So it's because the reason why they get it done is because they don't want to disappoint you. So what I'm saying now in relation to having that accountability partner, right, to use your term, having that accountability partner does not have to be the end all. It could be that starting place to keep yourself accountable until you develop the habit. Because I think if you set that accountability partnership and there's communication, once you start creating goals and achieving them, that creates momentum. And then at some point, you might need the accountability partner less and less and less until you don't need them at all.
But you see, that's part of it. Right? I think some people don't plan to wean off the accountability partner. Like, because when you talk about self-discipline, it kind of really breaks down to bad habits, right? Because let's say that you have a business. Let's say you have a job and you have a business at the same time, right? And like on the side, like a side hustle. And you could work at your job and do overtime and you put in all these hours, right? You put in X amount of hours anytime the job calls you. But when it comes to your own business, you don't have the same level of discipline,
Right.
right? You gotta start questioning yourself, like, how is it that I could do this for somebody else and I can't do it for myself?
Because you don't hold yourself accountable,
But,
but somebody else in the job holds you
Yeah,
accountable.
but then we start to talk about the discipline, right? And then having better habits, right? Like setting up your environment to kind of support your goals. It might cause you to lose a couple of friends, make a couple of relationships might be on pause for a little while, because you got to go into the real dark place and find that.
But that's hard.
It's very hard.
That's hard, and that's hard for a lot of people. And what I've noticed, and I had this conversation with somebody recently. So there was this, I can't remember what her name is, but there's this lady, she does motivational speeches. And she was telling this story one time about she was trying to develop her life and become who she is now. And at a certain period, she was hyper attached to her family. So everything she was attempting to do for herself and her family.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she had an epiphany. She came to the realization that there is a stage where if you have big ideals, if you have large goals, sometimes it's more difficult to achieve those goals if you have other persons that you're trying to carry along with you. So she said what she had to do was bite the bullet, make a hard decision to go after the goals on her own. Because, and she made the analogy that, the achievement of those goals is like a door. Sometimes the door is so small that you can't carry everybody through the door. You have to go through the door first, identify what's on the other side. And once you figure out what's on the other side, then you could come back and get some people, right? And that's a real thing.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a real thing. So, this is a new year. And, New Year's bring new hopes, new aspirations. People are a little bit more excited for a new year.
You see, and we talk about alchemy too. And, the principle of that is to gain anything of value, something of equal value has to be lost.
Right.
And sometimes to achieve these goals, some people, generally speaking, don't want to lose anything. They want to keep every single thing that they have and still achieve these other goals.
Yeah.
And it's rare that don't ever happen. You got to give up something. You go to school, you go to college, you give up time.
It's a sacrifice.
Everything is a sacrifice.
Yeah. Time and comfort.
You know what I mean?
Because university is usually hard. And even if you don't go to university, any high achievement is tied to sacrifice.
Yeah, every single thing.
If you're working for a company and you want to get to, let's say, management level, senior management level, director, whatever the position is, whatever that aspiration is, the sacrifice is long hours of work, honing the craft, really learning about the business or the industry that you're engaged in. And once you get to that stage of mastery, then you achieve whatever the financial goals are. Yeah, but that comes from sacrifice.
Even in the example, the sacrifice is sometimes even much more than that, because something you got to sacrifice certain relationships. Let's say that, like in a managerial position, like your coworkers, however, might get into some kind of conversation and it sounds exciting to you, but you have to kind of gauge yourself, to sacrifice some of the socializing that they do, because...
Step back, because there's a responsibility that comes with the position.
So it's a sacrifice all over.
Right.
So, and it goes to anything like parenting, everything is sacrifice.
But any high achievement, what I'm finding now, and I'm very, we're young men, but I think there's an intentionality behind the way we move. And what I'm finding now is anybody that you see that has achieved really, really big goals, that has done well, sacrifice was one of the things that they got comfortable with, and they also got comfortable with taking massive responsibility for a lot of things.
Yeah, because that is almost like that's the Achilles heel, right? Because they could even sacrifice their own family, like direct family,
right, to achieve the goal.
To achieve the goal.
But taking responsibility is a different animal altogether, because sometimes taking that responsibility would look like doing something that nobody else wants to do, or stepping out of your comfort zone and becoming somebody that you weren't, right? So it's like you're talking about, you mentioned being a leader at any level, and you might have been going parallel to your other team members, and you've been given this new responsibility, and that new responsibility now requires you to move a little different. So certain conversations you can't indulge in anymore. You get me? Certain things that y'all used to do, you can't do anymore because you have to adjust. And those things are really, really hard decisions to make. But if the goal is the goal, you have to make that sacrifice.
Yeah, it's very tough because, I mean, if you want to be somebody in society and you want to be successful in terms of just achieving the goals that you set for yourself that will make you feel successful, right? You know, it's a scary thing. But sometimes you could feel the anxiety even thinking about it, because let's say, for instance, you want to have this like #1 business, #1 podcast, and you know you dedicate your life to this every single day. You know, sometimes my mind kind of like reflects back to like a Kobe Bryant. You know what I mean? You could tell he made all the sacrifices to be the great player, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as he retires, basically, you know, when he passed away. And it's just like, man, imagine you work so hard, and in the back end, you did it because when you retire, you want to spend time now with your family. But so was the sacrifice worth it?
It was. It was, because while he's not here to enjoy the fruits, I think he left, 4 daughters behind?
I don't
3?
think so, maybe 2.
I think he got 3 daughters.
One passed with him as well.
Right.
That's
right.
2.
Okay. Yeah, so he left 2 daughters behind, right? But just imagine the life that those girls get to enjoy because of the work that he did.
Yeah, but that's one thing. But you know them girls gonna be looking for that.
Well, I mean, but that's nature, right?
Yeah.
That's life just taking an unfortunate course. On the back end, if we're talking about was the sacrifice worth it because of his death, it was worth it.
Yeah,
So
the
even,
opportunities.
unfortunately, yeah, he created the open doors that his kids now don't ever have to go through exactly what he went through. You know what I mean? They have a much more
And that's
pleasant life.
And that's if the kids like mind state is probably because some kids born in some situations and they could never achieve the same kind of level of success or even use the opportunities that the parents created for them. Like, they have no interest in nothing whatsoever. So it's just like, was it worth it in the end? Time will tell, in everybody's situation.
Well, I mean, I think it still would be worth it from the fatherhood perspective, because your responsibility as a man is to provide for your family, whatever they do with it on the back end, especially when you're not around. You can't control that. But it's just like having a son and, you build this massive business, let's say it's a construction business, and then you leave it for your son and your son just
destroys it.
Right. And gamble with the money and do all these things while you're not around. Well, that's his journey. That's his journey. Your journey was that journey of achievement and setting these things up because you had this vision. Unfortunately, you didn't make it to the finish line. Or what the finish line that you would have liked to make it to, your family would have liked you to be there for. But you leave something behind for your son to build on. He had a foundation, a massive foundation. He destroyed. That's his journey.
You created any New Year's resolution for yourself?
Not necessarily resolutions, because I try not to get into that space.
You see it as a waste of time?
To some extent. I see it as frivolous. There's a degree of frivolity attached to it, like saying these things and you know what I mean? Whatever, you see on social media, in all of these spaces where people write their goals on piece of paper and burn it, and I think I've gotten to a stage where personally, I don't feel like there's any utility in that because it doesn't anchor me to anything.
Yeah. So what do you do instead?
Well, so I have a vision, not necessarily a vision board. I've created a vision, and I write things down. So I have maybe like 3 really big goals that I want to achieve for this year. I've written them down and I've isolated each one and created a step-by-step plan as far as I could see. Because, some of these things, like, you don't exactly know how you're going to play out or what you have to do. But you could plan the first 2, 3, 4 steps. And what I'm finding out is once you start something, it usually creates momentum.
Yeah.
Because you might not know what to do.
Yeah.
But because you have the interest in doing it, then you go and ask a question. You identify somebody that you think might have the answer. You're going to ask them a question and they point you in a direction. You're going in that direction, somebody tell you, okay, you're going to go this. Now you have to go research to do the things that they ask you to do. So, it creates momentum. And if you're serious about it, then it will happen. But you just got to make the first step.
Yeah, that kind of falls into you making a decision, right? A clear decision and picking, which goal to go after first.
Yeah.
I'm not really like the religious type, but, I grew up in the, on the Seventh-day Adventist, like school and church and stuff like that. And, as you get older, you start to reflect on some of the biblical stories. And one that always stuck with me when it comes to goals is the story like Moses, when he has to, when he parted the Red Sea.
Right.
And they had to get the people from one point to the next.
Okay, when they were going to the Promised Land.
Yeah, to the Promised Land.
And they were crossing the desert and thing, and
Yeah,
they started complaining?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I always kind of put that towards goals. Like you're passing, you're going towards the Promised Land, which is the goal, right? And when you make your decision is almost like that rod that clears the Red Sea, right? And creates a pathway for you to get from one side to the next, right? And you have all these things on this side. But we got all distractions when you're passing through the desert. But then when you make that decision by the Red Sea, when you reach that point where you got to make that decision, once you make that decision and it clears the path, you know what I mean? Then you start to see things align. Like you're saying, like when you go and you ask a question and things start, the momentum starts to open up all these different channels. You start to see a direction, right? Because you start to make that decision, that clear decision. If you didn't make that clear decision, if you didn't use the rod in essence, but people look at it as a kind of story, but I look at it in a little bit more like on a mental, space.
For me, how I now view goal achievement, especially relative to any biblical concept or anything from the scripture, right? One of the things that I hold on to and is heavy for me, like I think about it a lot, is there's a scripture, not really big on scripture like that, but there's a scripture that says, when I was a child, I thought as a child, I acted as a child, but now I've become a man. I've put away all childish things. And I feel like that is a hurdle for a lot of people, right? We have certain behaviors that we exhibited, certain things that you do when you were more youth still. So let's say it's avoiding responsibility to align with your brethren them every week and religiously, right? Or as you sit down and you talk about what everybody else is doing, but you're not really doing anything.
You're not going towards your goal.
Then all of those are certain childish behaviors because childhood has an inherent comfort attached to it, right? Where does the comfort in childhood come from? You got parents, somebody looking after you. Is a parent, is a guardian, is an elder relative, grandmother, somebody, right? So between the ages of infancy to, let's say, around 18, 19, right? Most people, we got some people that had some really hard situations, but most people, they have an adult looking out for them, making sure they got their school books, their school clothes, whatever it is, the food, a roof over their head, right? And that creates a sense of comfort because there's a stability in that you don't have to work for.
Yeah.
And when you become a man, you're going to work for your own stability.
But you know what's funny, man? I think in the Caribbean context, right, sometimes, for me, sometimes it takes a while for you to even recognize that you're an adult.
Really? I guess my situation was different.
Your situation is different, right?
My situation was slightly different.
Yeah, so sometimes I think some people, it takes them a while to realize at 20 that they're an adult.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
I could see that. I could see that a little bit.
So, and you see that they kind of go into, it's almost like going from fifth form to sixth form. Like you're in CFB, like the college.
Right.
Right? But you're still in that mind frame of, you're still in high school,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Still playful, still
You're
got.
still around the same people. So it's kind of very hard to kind of, you know, realize that you are an adult.
And I mean, that realization would be delayed as well if you're insulated.
That's what I'm saying.
So that same insulation from parents or whoever it is that's trying to protect you. And it comes back to the concept of the overbearing mother. You know what I mean? Some, like you have a helicopter parent, somebody who do everything for you. So if you need to register for something, they're going and they're doing everything.
Yeah, they're sitting at you like your doctor appointments,
Right.
like all these things.
Right. They're not allowing you to go and pursue these goals or to achieve these little targets on your own.
Because they, you know, some parents, like I said, in the Caribbean context, it seems as though sometimes they don't allow their children to become adults. Like they're scared for them to go on their own.
Right.
So they do everything for them still, right? And it kind of keeps them to me in a childish state. But it's important too to kind of remain childlike in essence, in terms of as you live your life from, you know, from birth till death, right? Childlike in terms of like you have curiosity, like if you're interested in something.
Yeah, the outlook.
The outlook, right?
Right.
But no, not childish, but you know, when it comes to some of the parents and the Caribbean context, because you know, you would hear things in them bigger countries when you're 18, you gotta move out type of thing, because they're kind of gearing you up towards that. I'm not saying it's always healthy, but down in the Caribbean, you can see people, you know, they never really want to step on their own. You will see even like brothers living with their sisters for like X amount of years from birth till death,
Right.
And taking care of each other, you know what I mean? Like, so you kind of get stuck from the Caribbean context that I realize.
So they create a weird connection where there's always somebody to support you.
Yeah, there's always something there to support you.
So you always need a crutch. And you know,
As somebody always there to almost like bail you out.
Right.
It's like a child, like you keep it, you know.
and you know, that's an avoidance of competence, though. That's an avoidance of competence because there's a social psychologist that we listen to, and he had a quote where he said, you know, as an individual, you want to be the strongest person at your parents' funeral, right? That's how you gotta look at life. You want to be so capable that when this point in time comes, because it's invariably going to come, you are the person that everybody could look to and know, yeah, you got it covered. You're going to do the things that need to get done. You have the answers to the questions that they might need to ask, all of these things. But then that take intentionality, right? You got to be achieving these goals and going after things and making things happen for yourself. So it requires you to have that perspective that that's the type of person you want to be, because if you don't have that perspective, if you don't tell yourself this is what I want to be, then you're coasting through life. And you receive information from certain people who might not be the right people for you to be listening to. You fall into certain habits because you see other people displaying these kind of habits, and you create a circle, you create a cycle of dependency.
Yeah, and like the same thing, you know, you're saying there, you see some people as adults, they would kind of back up a childish, like, you know, like your peer groups. Like, you know, your close friends or family members or whatever the case may be, they could back up a childish decision that you made, right? So you don't really get that, like, that push to I know, like, you're wrong. Like, people hardly call out each other.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
That's something I
and
noticed.
check each other, you know, because they really want to ruin the friendship or something, or the relationship that they share with somebody.
Well, that's a double-edged sword, because from the perspective of the person that needs to do the check-in, that's a hard conversation. Hard conversations are usually very difficult to have, especially if you care about the person, because you really don't know how to approach it. So again, that takes intentionality, and sometimes you have to be brave in those moments. Like, okay, you and I are good, you know what I mean? And I say I care for you, and I see you doing something. Let's say is a relationship that you have that I feel like I've seen certain behaviors that you are demonstrating, and I know it's toxic for your relationship, whether it's with your mother or your brother or your sister or your child. You're talking to them a type of way, or you're behaving a type of way in your relationship, right? And I observe that. It's easy for me to say, well, ain't my business. He's his own man, and just fall back. But then that's against the backdrop of me saying, like, I care for you.
Yeah.
Use my boy, I got you like that. But no, man, I'm supposed to see you doing this thing too and saying, yo, bro, what you doing? That ain't the move. That ain't how we do things. And we dissect that. But a lot of people don't have the sense of maturity as well to receive that kind of reasoning. You know what I mean? Me and you're supposed to always be laughy and jokey. I can't come tell you when you're wrong. Because when I tell you when you're wrong, you get into your shell. You turn to a snail, you curl up, and that is it.
Yeah, and that comes from that could come from a whole heap of things, right? But nurturing. Like I remember when I worked, for this. I did some work for someone, and the feedback that I got about the work was almost negative.
Right.
But the way that they delivered what I was saying was very like heavy-handed. So I had to go make corrections or whatever. So when making the corrections and putting things together, I came back over my shoulder and said, yo, I didn't really mean to be, X, Y, Z. I said, listen, man, I don't learn nothing good from being pampered. Right? Because I accustomed to them hard talks. When you go up in that environment, so it kind of feels natural. Right? So sometimes somebody might come and tell you something. I was asking my son about what feels heavier, 100 pound of lead or 100 pound of feather. And he couldn't, he was like, the feather. Like he was guessing, and I had to explain to him, no, it's the same weight. Right? But sometimes people come to you and they tell you something that feels nice and cozy and comfortable, but you don't know that's the thing that's going to hold you back. And then somebody come and tell you something that feels like lead, feels like this overbearing pressure on you, but that's the thing you need to get to the next level. So I always look for that next thing, that thing to get me to the next level. And
a lot of it is ego and having a healthy ego, because it's easy for us to develop chips on our shoulders as we go through life, right? It's easy for you to develop a chip on your shoulder. But I had this older gentleman, was a polymath. And he was somebody that I was attached to for maybe about 7 years. We used to bounce ideas, and he used to teach me a lot of things, right? So I would say he was a mentor in a sense. And he taught me a lot. And one of the things he said to me is, there's always a lesson in every message. So he shared a poem with me, and there's a line in the poem, there's a stanza in the poem that says, listen to even the dull and the ignorant. They too have their story. And sometimes somebody approach you with a sound, a criticism, and they approach with a certain degree of ignorance, maybe they're heavy-handed, like you say. So they might be shouting, or there might be a degree of aggression attached to the delivery. What I always do is I always listen. I take a step back, remove my feelings from the encounter. Only in my personal relationships, that's difficult to do with your girlfriend or whoever. Sometimes she's telling you something, and you ain't like the tone, you ain't like how that tastes. But generally in life, when people say things to me, I listen to it, and I dissect it as if it was said to somebody else. So I don't personalize it. I put my personal feelings in a compartment. Okay, what he's saying, this, does that benefit me, or would it not benefit me if I were to listen to them? And if I see any benefit in it, I take the benefit. You see,
and sometimes you need that, because you need to take a step back sometimes when, people talking to you, especially the people who like care about you, and kind of like, in the moment is very hard to do.
Tight.
Right? But after the moment pass and you get time to yourself, like I always find it helpful to go and sift through the information.
Right? After the fact.
Yeah. Right? And if there's something that I see was, right, I would even go back to the person and say, yo, you was right with that thing the other day. Didn't understand it, but I guess sometimes to think about it. But, thanks.
But again, there's a lot of strategies for this type of growth if you want to achieve goals. Because even what we're saying now, in terms of, being able to sift through what people are saying, sometimes, and I see it with a lot of people, they're having a hard conversation. You might want to use the terminology an argument, right? But you're having a hard conversation with somebody. Let's say it's not boyfriend, girlfriend situation. It's somebody saying to you, this is what you did wrong. You don't like the tone, you don't like the taste, and you become defensive, right? Within that defensiveness is a problem, because when you're defensive, your reaction is to respond. But if you're responding, you can't properly hear what the person's saying same time, right? And for you to be able to go back and dissect it, you gotta be listening. Otherwise, you ain't gonna pick up everything. You ain't gonna hear what they're saying. You ain't even understanding what they're saying. Because a lot of times when we have those hard conversations with people, we identify portions of their delivery, portions of things that they're saying, just so that we could respond to that little thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yesterday, XYZ. You said, that happened yesterday, in the middle of their delivery, right? So you're cutting them off. And there's this back and forth, and it's very toxic. So it's like you're playing verbal tennis.
Yeah.
Yeah, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now, what I try to do is I try to be an active listener. And that has served me a lot in life. Me, I like the tears, what you're saying. Me, I don't even have to agree with you. But I can pause, I can take a moment and listen. And sometimes in the moment while you're listening, you're fuming, you know.
No, but sometimes in the moment you're listening, you're answering back too.
Yeah, right, but what I'm saying is, if you're actively listening, you're less inclined to really be answering back with any degree of consistency.
But you see, I believe if if you're a good listener, right, and you're having an argument with somebody and there's a back and forth, I think there you could tell a difference when the person is like totally bulldozing through everything you say, based on the kind of response they're giving you, because it could be like they're really responding to something that you say in the moment. But sometimes, I know you're talking about where they don't listen you right through.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes like you have a conversation with certain people, and you could tell that they're listening, but they have like a different perspective and the argument going.
Well, that's key. It depends on who it is, because there are some persons who are attempting to get their point across, and then there are some persons who are fighting.
Yeah.
Right.
But some people who defending like you said, like feel like they're being attacked, and once you kind of could register that, then it's just like you kind of have to take a different path. But that's so hard to do again, like in the moment.
And I think it's a skill that we need to cultivate. We need to pay attention to that and try to learn it. Because if you can learn that, trust me, yeah, man, unstoppable. Because you're able to hear what people are saying, and you make a more informed decision too.
Yeah.
You know, if this is based on what they say. You know, if this is somebody you want in your life, or if they're giving you feedback that would benefit you.
Yeah, I always say you gotta study where the sound coming from, not just run to it. Like really study it.
When you say study where the sound coming from, you mean the root or the intention behind what they're saying?
Even the person they're coming from.
Okay, right.
Right? Because, like me and you, for instance, if me and you have a hard talk, I understand they're coming from you. I know you don't, prove yourself to me over the years. Like, you're somebody that I could trust.
So you're not in a malice in what I say?
In a malice, even if you're coming out like the rough, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The is sifting through the content versus how it's being delivered. Like the blunt delivery of something. It's like sifting through the content to see what you're trying to say. And if I don't agree with something, I tell you, I may agree with that. I mean, like how that make me feel.
Right.
Right?
But again, and to that point, that practice is usually unemotional, right? Now, emotions and being triggered is two different things, but it's usually unemotional.
You know what? You know, I just noticed. I think once you really and truly know where the person's heart is, like you know that person, like annoys you, right? I could remove a lot of the emotional side of it.
It's easier to receive.
But if I didn't know where your heart is or where you stand, you know what I mean, then the emotional side would probably take over. Cause like who you think you're talking to?
I mean, there's a lot of persons who can't do that regulation. They can't regulate themselves in that way. It's anybody at all is who you're talking to. I mean, I'm supposed to be able to talk to you. I think I earned that right. And there are some persons who, again, back to the ego, because the ego is so big. Nobody could tell them nothing.
So then we go back to the same thing that we originally started talking about, which was setting goals and having an accountability partner and somebody you trust and all these different things, right? Because, you might say you want to lose like 10 pounds or whatever, and then we pass, one of these bakeries, American Bakery or something,
You want
Amory or something,
yeah.
and you go in there and you see all the sweet stuff, and you want to say, yo, you know, you can't, and it could lead into argument.
And I mean, so, that comes with a willingness to be annoyed, or a willingness to recognize that, to some extent you're going to get offended, you're going to feel slighted. Life is so dynamic. And Bob Marley said an amazing thing. Bob Marley said, in life, people going to make you suffer. You just have to identify who you're suffering for, or who was suffering for. And bro, that's the realest thing. Because there's no human being on this planet that's perfect, right? And as close as the relationship that you and I have, there have been times that you've offended me, and I know there's been times that I've offended you, right? But what you gonna do?
You tell the listener the truth. You don't tell me, yo, something just say, I want to fight you, bro.
What you gonna do? You have to register that, okay, listen, but that's how we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we go. So, and we got this thing where it's like no emotions from a king. Because an emotional response to me, especially when you're dealing with a brother, is a weak response.
I mean, it could play for women too, because no emotions from a queen. Yeah?
Well, that's for them. I really can't stand in this space. But, for me personally, it's like, I think certain things don't merit an emotional response. They merit more of a calculated response. So you have to respond, but where's the genesis of the response? It's just emotions, because emotions is feelings. And feelings could be floaty. You ain't really sure where the anchor.
Yeah, I always kind of look at feelings as like a fire, right? It could either warm up your house, or I could burn it down. It just depends on how you stoke it, how you know each other fire.
Yeah, but I personally feel like we entering a new paradigm. There is a lot of opportunity in the space right now. I can feel it, right? The space feels very dense. Like, there is abundance. There is a lot that is happening. Universally, not even just in St. Kitts, but we exist in this space. So I feel like there is a lot of abundance. But you ain't gonna really get opportunities unless you create them for yourself. That's something that I am learning. Like, somebody told me one time, the squeaky wheel get the oil. So you have to go after things. You have to pursue goals. If you really want things in life, you gotta go after it. And nothing gonna really come to you.
Yeah.
So I think this year is about taking up space.
I think that a big part of, like, for me personally, like when I set a goal, and in terms of like setting a plan sometimes, to be quite honest, a big part of me really just try to put my mind in a survival mode. Like, I need this, otherwise, this gonna be the end of me type of thing.
Yeah.
So then I just go at it. Sometimes with no plan, but just going towards that goal, and whatever comes.
One of the other things that I want to touch on before we get to the end is, and it's related to the intentionality behind doing anything. A problem that I had, right, is I think I'm a fairly intelligent person. So my mind goes 100 miles per minute. And as a result of that, I have 40 ideas in an hour. 40 different ideas that I want to pursue. Now, what I'm learning, and this comes with maturity and age, is it's good to have ideas, but the pursuit of the ideas and the conceptualization of the ideas is two different things. So you could conceptualize the 40 ideas, but you have to prioritize and identify, which idea you're going to chase. And once you create that priority, and once you identify which idea is number one, focus single-mindedly on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, but that's the thing. That's the only way. We always talk about having a core idea, which is your core. That's going to be the platform for every other idea to kind of link to.
Yeah.
So you have to develop that core, and you have to be, like, if we talk about sacrifices, you got to make the sacrifices. You got to get, like, you have to have emotion, but in the right places, right? You can't get caught up with what everybody else doing. You just got to focus in on what you're doing,
Yeah.
right? And you got to go very, very hard. You're going to be a lot of sleepless nights. Like, I could tell you from running your own business, you're talking about 4 to 6 hours of sleep.
And I
So
mean,
much.
the truth is, everybody isn't an entrepreneur.
No.
So if you don't have that gear, don't force yourself into it to fail.
Guys, so much things to balance because you got to deal with your own marketing, the business, the meetings, sending out emails, checking all these things, and then balancing out your family, making sure everybody covered.
Yeah, you got to dot all the I's, cross all the T's.
Yes, it's a never end.
And so a lot of it comes down to introspection, like really analyzing yourself.
And being honest with yourself.
Yeah, being honest and seeing if you are that type of person. Are you the type of person that is going to commit yourself 100% to whatever it is the aspiration is, whatever the goal is?
And if you're that kind of person that could take 99 no's, right?
Yeah, and be willing to stumble and fall and get up again.
Like I said, man, like I done, been in certain conversations and I done had I don't get it. In terms of like negative responses, harsh deliveries and stuff. But you have to just check all that stuff and compartmentalize and move on.
And a willingness to fail. A willingness to fail is important. I've failed more times than I can
Well, the
count.
thing is, when you're in that mindset, you don't even think about failing. Everything is a lesson. Right?
No, man, sometimes things feel like failures.
No, well, as it pertains to the business, it could feel like failure.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of use that and learn from that.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. You have to be willing to fail because you said get 100 no's. The first no going to feel like a failure, but you got to be willing to go after something else again and get another no.
I see. Well, that's the thing. Like, I never ever felt like I never felt that. I gotta be honest with you. I never felt that per se, right? And I think
Well, what we're doing is we're dissecting it for the persons that are listening as well. So everybody ain't gonna gotta say.
yeah, I understand that, but just telling you from my perspective, right? As it is right now, right? Because I once had this job that every Friday we used to do this thing called lessons learned. So I had all these things that kind of taught me these strategies in terms of like, look at things as lessons learned, right? Some people might look at it as a failure and then afterwards they feel like, that, okay, they may see you do something that's successful, but they don't know that. But I know I had a bunch of failures. I take all them failures and learned a lesson from them, and this is what I did for that, right? So it's just teaching you how to just turn that negative energy or the negative response or the negative result into something much more positive and constructive.
But I mean, it's important for us to really plot the course for this year as we move forward and identify what we want to achieve, how we intend to achieve it, and the connections that need to be made in order to achieve it. Because sometimes it's not even just about you, right? Sometimes a goal that you've created for yourself is so big that you require a network.
Mm-hmm.
You require connections with a bunch of other people in order to make it either run more smoothly or just to get certain things done. Because we all know how this place operates. St. Kitts, small island, 68 square miles, or 57,000 people, or whatever the number is. No man is an island. You have to be able to reach out to somebody or pick up your phone and make a call and say, hey, bro, I need this thing done. Could you help me or could you point me in the right direction? So, in goal achievement, a lot of it is creating meaningful relationships and being able to sustain those relationships as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to, like you said, it's easy to make sometimes and harder to maintain.
Yeah.
So we have to know how to maintain those relationships.
Life. I mean, but, so if you have a New Year's resolution, if you've created a New Year's resolution for yourself, kudos to you. You know what I mean? But attack it. If you set the resolution, focus on that. Don't create 15 resolutions. Don't even create 5 resolutions. Create a single resolution that you want to achieve.
Yeah.
Knock that out the park, and then you create another one behind it.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta wage war on yourself.
Constantly.
Wage war on yourself, like all that comfortable stuff, you gotta get real uncomfortable.
Because what we identify is we are our biggest enemies, right? There's nobody externally who doing more damage to you than you, It's all in the headspace. And these are things that I'm learning as I go through life, that we are our biggest enemies. Sometimes just how we deal with situations creates more situations. You might have somebody and you don't identify that person sensitive, but you're still approaching them in the same way, right? They're going to irritate them and create additional sensitivities, and then you and them have a negative relationship. And all you could really control is yourself, right? So if you could only control yourself, things that you can things that you can change, rather, are things about you, because you can't really force nobody to change.
No.
And you can't ask a person to change either.
Yeah, that thing about even like being sensitive and approaching somebody sensitive is such a tricky conversation sometimes, because you don't really want to have a negative response or a relationship or things develop into go the wrong way, right? But at the same time too, if you care about a person, let's say it's your son or something, and you see your son gets irritated, or your daughter, you still want to give them the tools, and sometimes you got to approach them with the real. It's like you don't, and it's almost like you got to stay in their pocket and don't get distracted by the emotional response. You got to get kind of non-emotional about the way you're delivering it, and make sure that you stay on point and you just say exactly what you want to say. And afterwards, you could step back and just leave it and like simmer. Right? But it's important for them to have them tools when the time comes, because you're not going to be in their life forever.
But again, it comes down to you identifying the person that you're interacting with as well. Because sometimes the real doesn't have to be harsh.
No.
Like some people could receive the real as, very straightforward and blunt. Yeah. And they could dissect that. Even if it doesn't feel comfortable for them, they could look at it in retrospect.
Yeah,
but there are some persons who, that hardline approach just doesn't work.
Yeah. So, and it's always like improving yourself too, as a leader.
It's all about self.
Because I think we talk about that in how to win friends and influence others.
People?
I think, yeah.
How to influence people.
And he was talking about he wanted to get a message across to a guy, and he told him a story about an abstract story, but when the person heard the story, he was talking about him.
Right.
He got the message, and it was an argument.
Yeah. Well, I think he was saying he had an employee,
yeah,
and the guy wasn't performing well, and he gave a story saying how would you deal with this employee? And when guy broke it down, he realized why you're talking about me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that sometimes is soft approach.
Well, and and they have a bunch of tropes, a bunch of analogies, a bunch of things that people say. And they say, sometimes you have to, I think they say, hide the medicine in the honey, something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So, there are different delivery methods, especially if you're intentional about getting a point across.
And it's difficult for people like us to get a point across, because we have very
intense, communication styles. Yeah, the way you talk
intense,
to people.
Yeah, and very clear too. And I think when you're articulate, in a sense, people get intimidated sometimes, when you can articulate your thoughts properly.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's best for us to just keep quiet and try to find another way how to deliver a message.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm learning as well is sometimes I don't have to be the messenger.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I don't have to be the messenger. I go to somebody else and ask them to deliver the message on my behalf, because I know you might be a little bit more receptive if this person bring it to you, right? So it's just strategy, chess, not checkers. Yeah, it's just about learning how to engage with the world and how to communicate with people, because at the end of the day, it's all about achieving the goals that you set.
Yeah.
It's all about achieving the goals. That is the end all.
Well, not even that you send somebody else to, going back to that, sometimes it's almost like, a friend that I'm not a friend of, said person, who you're not really, that in your friend group per se, but they're delivering the same message but in a different way.
Right.
But it's the same exact thing, you know what I mean? And I guess it just breaks down to your groups.
It comes down to what is going to get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
If we could identify, X approach is going to get the job done, then that's the approach that we take. But sometimes as people, we get attached to it being us that delivered whatever it is.
Yeah.
Ego. Yeah. So that egoic attachment to, oh, I was the one that told you this. I teach you this. I was the one that corrected you in this regard. Like, bro, I've gotten to a stage where I really don't care about that.
No.
I just want to make sure things smooth. If it's smooth, yeah, because if you like it, I love it.
Yeah, and sometimes we focus on winning and losing, and I always tell people, don't focus on the winning and losing, just focus on the truth, like get to the truth and just move on.
But sometimes it is winning and losing, but then there are battles and wars. And sometimes you have to lose the battle to win the war, right? So sometimes, again, to the point, that little small interaction is the battle. But if you step away from that small interaction, like you being the one to deliver a message here. So I say, okay, I realize my son ain't really listening to me because I'm telling him this. It low-key is a punch in my gut, because if I gotta go and say, Atiba, I want you to talk to X person about this for me because he ain't listening to me. You know what I mean? That's like, you gotta take a step back, and that might be the battle that you lose, the mental battle.
Yeah.
Where you feel like, oh, they ain't listening to me, but they're willing to listen to Tibo. There could be some ego attached to that, because you feel like Tibo more important than you, however the vibe is. But if the message gets delivered and you see changed behavior, that's the war.
In a sense, yeah. In a sense.
And that is what we attempting to do.
Yeah, but and at some level too, you kind of, sometimes you don't want to disqualify. Like, let's say that you tell me something, and then I going to do a survey from about 10 other people to come back on to the same thing that you said.
Yeah.
And I do that enough times, repeatedly. You're going to start to feel like, maybe I'm not even going to try to tell you anything.
Yeah, and it depends on the nature of the relationship.
Yeah.
Because if it's somebody that you hold close and the person should be holding you to a certain degree, you feel like, there should be some respect that's accorded based on the relationship, the nature of the relationship, then yeah, I could see where that would be touchy.
Because I think I seen a video on YouTube recently with a woman saying that, sometimes people don't even understand that in itself is disrespectful. Like, you tell them something, but they go to multiple people, get the same answer, and then come back to you like it's always like it's something new.
And some of the times what I've found is a lot of times it's unconscious. These people they just don't have that depth. Like, because they're so oblivious and they couldn't receive the message. It's just like love. Sometimes a message is like love. There's some persons who can't receive your love. They gotta go through certain things first to realize the value in what you're trying to teach them, or what you're trying to show them, or how you're trying to be with them, right? And it's certain people too, they gotta go through certain slip and fall and skin the knee.
Yeah.
And then when they come back around to it, they realize, oh, but that's what he was telling me all the time.
Yeah. Pain is love, right?
Yeah.
So
you gotta go through it.
You can't experience the love without the pain.
No. Those things are required. But, there were a lot of takeaways from the conversation today. And it's January.
Yeah. And we started with goals, but we went all over the place.
Well, it all comes back to the goals still. Yeah. How do you achieve the goals, and what does the approach? Yeah. What should it look like? Because we can't be idealists. But, again, the hour done one off.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And we are at 6 p.m. So you have been listening to the He Nuh Show on WINN Media 98.9. I am Alonzo Alexander, and my co-pilot is Mr. Atiba Byron.
He Nuh.
We're in the studio, and we're doing it heavy for 2023. So we have some guests lined up. Please tap in. Ask your sister to tap in. Tell your grandmother to tap in. Invite your father to tap in. Get them the YouTube link. You know what I mean? Let's make it a little bit more intentional. Real discussions that we're having here on WINN Media 98.9 about life. From a general perspective, we started off saying this from a man's perspective, but I think we don't kind of transition from just the masculine, and it's just people, right? But to everybody that's been tapped in, we appreciate you. Thank you for joining us into 2023, and we're going hard this year for sure.
For sure.
I hope your new year has started amazing, and We hope you have an amazing week. Good evening.
You found the sound. 98.9 WINN FM.